Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
Bit Podsmash. Bit Podsmash.
Where gaming goes to grab a beer. We are your hosts.
Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing ideas that you care about with video games.
Huzzah! Huzzah!
And tonight's idea is all about localization.
That's right. Which is basically translating games, but there's a little bit more to it than that, and we'll get into it. But it's a fascinating topic of like making games work with other cultures. It's great.
Yes, so, we are a global society and global video games.
Yep. We are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Founder's Green Zebra, a Gose-style ale.
Name.
It's an awesome name and even cool artwork to go with it. But it's a Gose-style ale brewed with watermelon and sea salt. It's a little sweet for my taste, which means you probably love it.
I love it.
Because you love sweet beer. But it's not over. I love this. This is a really good beer. It's really, really strong with watermelon. So if you've had 21st Amendment's Hell or High Watermelon, that's way more subdued than this one. This one's like watermelon, like as soon as you take a sip, it's in your face. And then there's a little bit of sea salt on the edges, like as you down it. And other than that, it's kind of like it leaves that sweet aftertaste in your mouth. And it's only 4.6%. So, you can drink a bunch. That's about it. This is good. It's a 12-ounce can. So what do you got?
I'm drinking my watermelon and beer too. The Wicked, returned to the last few cans of my Wicked Weed watermelon dragon fruit burst. I'm trying to remember. I don't have the can in front of me, so I'm trying to remember it. But yeah, it's good. If you
what
don't
is with
remember,
us in watermelon lately?
Yeah, I know. It's we're just itching for summer, right? Like June is around the corner. Yeah. I guess June. It will be June by the time this airs. So, but right now it's still May. So, anyways, it's a great beer. If you don't remember my assessment of it, or if you hadn't heard my assessment of it, it's more dragon fruity than watermelon. So the watermelon flavor is definitely there, but the dragon fruit kind of overwhelms it. And dragon fruit's already kind of a sour, bitter taste. But it's a sour ale, and it's nice. It's kind of like a glass of sour Skittles. So I like it because it's sweet, but I can see how others would be turned off by its sweetness, if that makes sense, just like you were talking about. But it's got that nice tart end to it, and that dragon fruit's such a distinct flavor, and it kind of just, I find dragon fruit kind of comes in waves. You're kind of like, oh, okay, flavor. Oh, that's a flavor. Oh, more flavor. Okay, great. So, but yeah, very fruity, very good. It's got a nice pink hue to it, which is fun. So,
sweet.
Yeah. Anyways, so we usually like to start our show by talking about news and goings-ons in the industry.
Man.
And we've had a couple of slow weeks, and suddenly it was like, news.
Yes, lots. So we'll try to get through it in a relatively timely manner so we have enough time to talk about localization. But we'll start with the biggest hit of news that was completely out of left field was a presentation from Epic Games on Unreal Engine 5.
Which is funny, because you might remember, if you listened to last week's episode, we talked about game engines, and you may wonder, why didn't they just talk about the recently revealed Unreal 5? Because when we recorded that episode, it was like a day before that presentation. So we unfortunately missed talking about Unreal Engine 5, but it has been announced and it has been shown off what it's capable of.
And Unreal is an engine that is usually across all platforms, as we discussed in that episode about game engines last week. But what's cool about this one is it was completely on PlayStation 5. So much so that they even said it was an HDMI cable directly out of a dev kit. And it was later confirmed that this presentation was for GDC, for the media to actually play, for developers to physically get their hands on it. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch of speculation about the DualSense controller reveal and like how that would have been revealed at GDC as well. And they would have had the DualSense controller right there with the PlayStation 5 dev kit playing this demo. So what's important about this demo? Well, it's called Lumen in the Land of Nanite. And like I said, it runs completely on PlayStation 5. So the stuff that I'm going to read...
Just to be clear, it's not an actual game demo. It is just it's a demo that's meant to show off. It's playable, but it's meant to show off just what the engine is capable of creating, rendering. And so it's not like it's a preview of a game. Yeah, no one will ever really play this fully realized game, but it was meant to... Yeah, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, good. Matt Kim over on IGN is the article that I'm going to read from. It's a little bit of a synopsis. But... it's shows off a couple of tools. One of them is called Lumens, a dynamic global illumination tool, and Nanite, a virtualized geometry that lets artists import film-quality art and assets into Unreal Engine. The demo shows a woman venturing into a rocky cavern and discovering a hidden temple. The demo takes a particular point to highlight how light and objects react dynamically. The demo ends with a thrilling fight through a crumbling canyon. All the assets and visuals in the demo are reacting in real time, meaning the PlayStation 5 is processing the demo as it happens.
I watched
this demo. It is insane. It is next level insane.
It's hard to think about like what as we continue to get closer and closer to the graphics plateau, it's hard to think about like what could be improved graphics wise with games, because games are already pretty beautiful now. Y'all, this demo is like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, the next gen is actually a thing. Like, it is a step up. It's not as big of a step as we've seen in the past with some, with like the jump to 3D, for example, but it's still impressive. It's an impressive movement towards photorealism, just the animations, the lighting, the hair, everything. It was great. Mm-hmm. The game itself, or the demo itself, it was kind of like Tomb Raider meets Magic. Like if Lara Croft had magic, that's what the game looked like. It was, but it was gorgeous. The only thing that was weird was her face. And like I thought about it later, I was like, well, I guess they weren't trying to show off like facial rendering, but like her face kind of looked cartoony and weird compared to like the beautiful, like intricately detailed statues they had. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But
so the millions, like billions of triangles that they can render now, to get a little bit more technical and like why this demo matters and some of the cool things they showed off is like the movie quality assets. And what that means is the textures are up to 8K resolution and they don't have to compress them as much because of the new hardware of the solid state drive, low level solid state drives, ridiculously fast, like never done before, unprecedented. Tim Sweeney. Tim Sweeney even said that what is possible on the PlayStation 5 is not available for any amount of money on any PC right now. Like you cannot buy this technology. It is completely brand new.
People came out later and debunked that, by the way. That statement that he made.
You can get a solid state drive that is close to the same speed, but there's no thing that can use it like the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, his comment was about efficiency, but I think some people came out. I think some technical people came out and just they did the math basically and proved that he was kind of blowing it out of his butt. That statement. Ooh. So
a little marketing PR for you.
I'll have to see. Who knows? It's a little. It is definitely that is a statement. That is definitely a statement that he made, and whether it's true or not, and whether or not he was just kind of fluffing up the PlayStation because there was also like people were talking about how he very, very specifically never mentioned the Xbox. I think he said the word Xbox once in the entire presentation. And like the guy who was the guy from Kind of Funny, I'm blanking on his name, who did or was it Jeff Keighley?
Jeff Keighley from Game Awards.
Oh, it was Jeff Keighley. Yeah. So gotcha. Yeah. So Jeff was like trying to get him to like confirm like it will run this well on the Xbox as well, right? And he'd be like, it will run well on all platforms. It's kind of like the responses.
Yeah, cagey. Yeah.
So there was clearly some like cross, arrangements that Sony made, and they probably asked him not to talk about the Xbox and just talk up the PlayStation. So how true the veracity of his statements are probably subject to a certain level of scrutiny based on that. But nevertheless, one comment I had was I think I told you, I was like, there's a moment in the demo where she like squeezes between two, like a very narrow corridor, which is like game code for we are disguising a load screen right now. And so people were like, oh, is that did they sneak in a load screen? And Tim Sweeney did confirm that was not a load screen. But I'm like, you got to be careful with that. Like that is a gaming trope, is the squeezing between squeezing. It's in every third person game, God of War, Uncharted, Tomb Raider. It's like you see it all the time. It's to the point of tedium. But what I didn't realize when I watched the demo was that's actually code. Like people know that in the gaming industry. It's like, oh, that's a secret load screen. So, but
the point of that whole like narrow cavern, and the reason why it was even in there was to show off a new animation technique for Unreal 5 that allows the models to dynamically react to their environments. And so like an animator doesn't have to physically move the model, like the girl doesn't have to move her hand and arm to like touch the wall. It figures that out and it like does it does the legwork for you.
Yeah, I almost wish they had just taken a moment to like jiggle the controller screen just to show that, you know what I mean? Like, this is not load screen. Cool. This is all rendering. Like, and it was also meant to like show the detail up close, get really close up to that wall just to show the level of detail. But they could have done just one little nod to be like, this is not a load screen.
Yeah, that would have been cool if they did. So yeah, the environments are all like movie quality assets. Super high resolution stuff is being streamed in really fast at real time. All of the models are, ridiculous amounts of triangles, higher than we've ever had. And the comparison is today they have to use like low polygon models and optimize for the engine to reduce the load on the GPU at any given time. And then they doctor it with the texture work, and they doctor it with normal mapping, and they doctor it with lighting. And normally the lighting is all pre-programmed, and you can't take a single light source and like move it around an environment and watch it change dynamically. Well, now you can. And they showed that in the new demo too. So none of that work has to be done to make an environment look a certain way. It makes and it streamlines game development from all those perspectives. It's reducing artist work time on animation, lighting, and detail of the textures.
Yeah, you had mentioned before we started. Yeah, I was gonna say, you mentioned before we started how this could basically be its own topic in and of itself. So let's wrap it up.
So that's the gist of it. And then the very end of that whole demo, she flies from like the peak of a mountain back down to the beginning, and it shows the streaming speed. You don't see a single like pop in ever. None of the resolution is lost through the motion blur. You can like pause, freeze frame, and see how everything is completely rendered perfectly at crazy fast speeds, which again shows off the solid state drive. Everything about this really does show like the solid state, the whole architecture of the storage. All of it is pretty much emphasizing that, except for the lighting, which would be the GPU and the ray tracing and stuff. So really cool stuff. And it opened my eyes to what next gen could be. And if this is an early tech demo, like I'm super excited what gaming will look like in 6 years. Yeah. Like it's going to be nuts.
Yeah, it'll be it'll be cool to see. Definitely invest in a nice TV. If you don't have one already, invest in a nice TV. But yeah, to get the most out of it. But cool. All right. What's next on the news docket?
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remastered were announced. Completely out of nowhere. It was just a Summer Games Fest announcement. It was like, hey, tomorrow at 11 a.m. we're going to have an announcement. And boom, it was Tony Hawk. He's been working with Activision to work in the production of these remakes. It's done by Vicarious Visions. They're the ones who did Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, which is amazing. They're recreating the original games, like true to their form. It's like down to the Neversoft's original code and geometry, like inch by inch, so that the lines feel exactly the same way as they were before. So this is Jonathan Dornbush over at IGN. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is back as Activision has announced Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, a compilation remake of the first two Tony Hawk Pro Skater games developed by Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy studio Vicarious Visions, which has a long history with the series. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 will be released for all the platforms on September 4th. So that's happening. I'm extremely excited. The soundtrack is on Spotify right now, and they've preserved, somehow they got all the licensing straightened out, and they have all the original songs, and it looks breathtakingly gorgeous. Just like Crash, it really is awesome. They're overhauling the Create a Park to be like super, super good. So if you're into creating your own skate parks, they're going to do a whole bunch of craziness, lots of freedom in designing your dream park. And you can like recreate your own real world skate parks and design completely original ones. So that should be nuts. I was extremely excited about this. And it just like nostalgia from sideswiped me completely, because this was not even on my radar, not even in my brain. Like I was not even thinking about Tony Hawk, and then I saw
everyone's
this
video
been talking
about like, Skate 4 or whatever. Like that's what everybody wants, is a different franchise, but it's still a next gen skating game. We're not quite getting that, but still getting a remaster of one of the most classic skating games of all time. Tony Hawk himself is like 60 years old now. You're not that old, like but 40. He's an old dude. Yeah, he's an old dude. He's in his 40s. It's pretty funny.
There is also a really,
sorry,
really cool...
Tony Hawk. Sorry for calling you a septuagenarian.
Nice. There's a really cool video on Jack Black's YouTube channel, Jablinski Games, of Jack Black skating in a skate park with Tony Hawk, and this game, they talk about it. Jack Black plays it. It's awesome. So if you want more info, go check that out. This drove me to pull out Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. So I was playing that after the announcement. I was like, this is so nostalgic. The soundtrack and the feel of skater culture was so influential to me in my formative years. I was just like transported to a different world and a different time. It was awesome.
Yeah. All right, we have 5 minutes. 5 minutes for the next three announcements.
It's 2. I only have 2 more. Oh, you have 1. Yes, I have 2 more. You have 1 more. Out of nowhere, also, Paper Mario, the Origami King, was announced by Nintendo. They just dropped a direct out of nowhere.
Is that Paper Mario 3 then?
6.
Oh, 6. Oh, okay. All right. Lots of Paper Mario.
Super Paper Mario on the Wii was 3, and then there's Paper Mario Paper Jam on the 3DS, and then there was Color Splash on the Wii U. So that was 5. This is the 6th entry. And here's Nintendo's like little press announcement. Mario faces one of his most thrilling challenges yet in Paper Mario the Origami King, when the dangerous King Ali unleashes his plan to fold the entire world. Just when matters couldn't get worse, he's bound Princess Peach's castle in giant colored streamers and transported it to a distant mountain. He's even transformed Bowser's minions into folded soldiers and enlisted them in his treacherous cause. It looks absolutely gorgeous. The art style is perfect. It's just like Yoshi's Crafted World meets like Kirby's Epic Yarn and paper. It just looks really, really, really crisp and sharp and colorful, and it's charming as I'll get out. And I want this in my face now. Like, I am on it. I want it so badly. I haven't pre-ordered it yet. I don't know yet if I'm going to get it on release day or not. I'm definitely asking for it for my birthday because it comes out on July 17th.
What?
So the same day as the next news story, Ghost of Tsushima, which we've been calling it. Well, yes, Tsushima. We have been calling it Tsushima before. So instead of Tsushima, it's Tsushima.
Tsushima. That does sound more Japanese in hindsight.
And Ghost is singular. So I was always calling it like Ghosts of Tsushima.
It's funny. Yeah. No, right. I'll talk about that later.
Oh,
no, it's fine.
So Ghost of Tsushima was shown off through a Sony State of Play video, which lasted about 18 minutes. Also a July 17th release date. So I'm going to read a little paragraph from Polygon, written by Nicole Carpenter. Go check out her article. Sony and developer, that's weird, Sucker Punch Productions gave viewers an extended look at new gameplay footage, including exploration, combat, and more. There was no news on the PlayStation 5 expected for the State of Play. Just a big, beautiful look at Sucker Punch's PS4 open world epic. So breaking it down really quickly, there was gameplay footage. It did show exploration.
It was entirely gameplay. Well, for the most part, it was entirely
the entire thing,
footage, which was great.
Yep. They showed off the environments. You're guided by wind in the environment. There's like birds that like show you where to go, and it looks absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
Very, very
like
Horizon
fire,
Zero Dawn meets.
It's also very Breath of the Wild too, in regards to like you'll have visual cues as opposed to like pinpoints on your mini map. But it's like, oh, there's like a burning village off in the distance, so you have to go over there to the burning village. I like that idea of like visual cues as opposed to
it's more immersive. It's not
for sure.
And for this kind of like feudal Japan era, it does seem a little like not normal for there to be GUIs and like Horizon Zero Dawn lended itself nicely to GUIs because it's kind of like future past. And there's all the tech and all of the robots and her suit and the like little eye scanners like Dragon Ball Z. But this is feudal Japan, so you're just a guy on a horseback who's like a samurai. Speaking of samurai, they showed off combat, which looks awesome. Very, 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 very Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, maybe Dark Souls kind of intentional combat. And it showed one way to approach a base as a samurai with full armor, head on, headstrong.
You can like challenge people to duels, like come at me, and then you cut them down viciously. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The samurai combat.
The other side of it, which they weren't crystal clear on if there was a moral switch between the two, but the way they made it sound, it's like, or you can be a ghost, and like the tone just changed to like dark and stealthy.
Yeah,
and
I read they clarified all of the tools you will have available to you. And only the gear will make a difference between like how effective you are in each situation. But you can basically switch between the ghost and the samurai at will, which is
that's exactly
pretty cool. Yeah, they clarified that later. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I imagine it'll be circumstantial. Like you'll be more effective as the ghost at night and more effective as the samurai during the day. I'm guessing, but I don't know that for sure. But yeah, it's like you have stealth approach or like a more combat heavy approach, and there looks to be, like you said, very intentional, but it's not like stealth games where it's like predetermined. Like, it looks like you can approach stealth your way, and if you make mistakes, you have tools available to like, smoke bomb, and get back behind things. So it's very, very cool.
If you ever watch Termite stream on Twitch, you know that Termite's going to make a lot of mistakes and needs as much help as you want. Sorry, go ahead.
So they showed off a lot of other features too. The big one that I'm most excited about is they showed off Samurai Cinema mode, where you can basically play the entire game in a black and white grainy filter as if it were a samurai movie, which just sounds really cool. But it looks great. I'm actually looking very, very much forward to that game in regards to upcoming releases. But the last little bit I want to talk about, squeeze in real quick, is just this morning they announced the new Borderlands 3rd DLC. It's called Bounty of Blood, and it's subtitled Fistful of Redemption. So I'm hoping for some Red Dead Redemption references personally.
Oh, but absolutely. It's totally satirical on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a very Westerny looking. There's also some kind of like Asian Chinese influence as well. It looks like in kind of the vibe. They had originally teased this DLC as Outlaws and Dinosaurs, and there are definitely dinosaurs. The Saurians make a return as like as the enemies, and there's also bad guys and stuff. They did they haven't confirmed any returning characters. In fact, they made a big deal of talking about how it's all new, a whole new cast of characters, and so that's been a bit of controversy because people want to see people want to see their favorite characters come back. I fully suspect that that's a red herring. I fully suspect they're trying to keep some cameo appearance secret. Personally, that's my theory. But I also like the idea of them going with new characters because, quite frankly, some of the best characters in the new DLCs, the Handsome Jackpot and the Wainwright, the marriage, have been some of the new characters. In fact, the Wainwright one has introduced a new character that's now one of my absolute all-time favorites. So,
more than Tiny Tina, huh?
Not more than Tiny Tina, but he's definitely up there with Tiny Tina and the others. Is like, oh my gosh, his character is just bursting with possibility. So I'm open to a new cast, and it looks good. I'm hoping for a returning character though as a cameo. That would just be a nice little selling point there, personally. But cool,
that's cool.
All right, well, we can move on to our next segment, which is
you go first.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Favorite things is a segment. We tried to clean that up for you guys because it's the overlapping, I'm sure, was getting tedious hearing us overlap terribly while we're remote. Favorite things is a segment where we just share what we're digging this week, what we're excited about, in hopes that you might find your next favorite thing. We're going to do it quick because I want to also squeeze in a what are you planning before DLC.
Ooh, what are you planning? Okay. Sounds good. Go ahead with your favorite thing while I
it's hard. It's on mine. As much as I said that I'm like it needs to be quick. I have like 3, but I will narrow it down. I'll narrow it down to 2. I will simply say, as an honorable mention, I saw the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and it was very fun. I very much enjoyed it. But it's not my favorite thing. My favorite thing is Macy and I made naan pizzas. I don't know if you've ever had.
Oh, naan is amazing. Naan pizzas are awesome.
Yeah. So we got naan bread and we coated it with olive oil and then we put toppings on it and we crisped it. And
it's so good. Yes.
Oh, it was awesome. It was like, it was just I was very happy with it. My wife had found that recipe and I just made a massive pizza. It was great. So it was delicious.
Definitely done that. It's definitely delicious.
Yeah, and then my second favorite thing actually kind of ties into what are you planning. So I'll just kind of 2 birds with one stone here. I've been playing Persona 5 Royal. I'm on my I'm on my RPG kick in general, but specifically JRPGs. And I'm finally diving into Persona, and it's a blast. But one of my favorite things, it's a weird game because, like, by all accounts, it doesn't do anything gameplay wise particularly revolutionary. Like, everything about the gameplay is just kind of like cut and paste from other games. Like, other games do these kind of things better, but the combination of the whole and then wrapped up in the like style and story, it is totally a style over substance game, and I love it. Normally I'm like, I want some substance, but this is like, it knows what its strengths are and leans fully into just being this stylishly over the top great game, and it works. But what I've noticed about it's really funny is it's the kind of disconnect between American and Japanese cultures. There's lots of little tiny things, but since you are basically playing half the game is just like living life as a Japanese high schooler, you get like a little insight into Japanese culture. And one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the random background characters will be doing things like wearing masks over their faces.
Oh yeah.
And that's a Japanese thing. Like, this game came out...
It's an Asian thing in general,
Yeah, this game came out in 2000... it's a non-American thing, let's be real. But, like, people in Japan just wear masks when they feel sick. And that's a common thing. It's a normal thing. But it's really funny now, 3 years after this game came out, and now there's a global pandemic, and like there's a scene where you're sitting there in a movie theater and like everybody's sitting like 2 or 3 seats apart, and there's people with masks on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so prescient. It was great. That I've like been noticing how like, Japanese culture is like already well acquainted with this kind of new reality, and it's still, that's not to minimize the struggles the Japanese people have been having throughout the pandemic, but it is definitely like, they are more comfortable with just wearing masks in public than we are. And it's fun seeing that in the context of this game that came out 3 years ago.
Yeah. And I mean, America always has, not to go on too much of a tangent, but there's always been like this free-spirited independence in America. Like we do what we want. And it's kind of led to a little bit more in general, like selfishness. And in Japan and in China, masks are normal because people are more aware of each other. And they're more conscientious of others and how they affect others. So when they are sick, they do wear a mask. And it's very common. It's very normal. And it's been that way for years. America's just now catching up because of coronavirus. Yeah. So it's... And even there, people are like, no, I won't wear a mask. How dare you tell me to wear a mask? Yeah, exactly. Yep. There's still a pushback on it. But cool. It's nuts. All right. What's your favorite thing and what are you planning? My favorite thing... is I have been doing these work happy hours on Fridays at 4:00 in the evening, and we get on a WebEx, and all of our coworkers come together. We're all drinking something, and we just kind of shoot the breeze, chat, catch up. How's everybody doing? And I have been tasked with and experimented with this morning trying to get a Jackbox game from my PlayStation 4 screenplay share, remote play to my computer, and then screen shared over the WebEx to let everyone play. And I did a test run this morning, and it was amazing and super fun because I don't know if you played Jackbox party games before, but there's a max player of 8. But other than that, there's an overflow into an audience. Yeah. And the audience gets to participate too. So there's really like no limit to how many people you can have. And I just discovered that limit. Yeah. And so we were playing this morning. We went through one round of like murder trivia, and it was awesome. We had a blast, and I can't wait to actually do the thing tomorrow because it's Thursday today. So tomorrow we'll have another happy hour, and we're going to play Jackbox Party. So I'm really excited. That was my favorite thing. Just like connecting with coworkers and stuff has been really cool with that. And what are you planning? This is this could lead into a more of a lengthy talk, so you have to cater me, or you have to tamper me down, or whatever you want to call it. What are you planning? Rein me in. Answer it. Okay, I've been playing Mortal Kombat 11. It was my favorite thing last week. I've continued to play it, but I'm not playing it. I've sunk 25 hours into the game, and I have not spent more than 4 hours with the controller. It's so weird that they've developed an entire game that can be played with an AI, and you can set up an AI fighter to do stuff. And so I almost have the platinum. I have 2 more trophies to get, and I'll have a platinum trophy. And I haven't actually played it, but more than like 5 hours. It sounds like it's so strange. That's crazy. About how the trophies are structured, what you have to do to get those trophies, and why in the world would developers put an AI controlled character that lets you do everything. That contributes to that. From a design perspective and from a game development perspective, I just don't understand the motive to do that. It sounds like an oversight. I think it's like, there's no way. It's got to have been an oversight, or it's got to have been one thing where they just didn't care about the platinum. Like, they were required by Sony to like do the platinum. You know what I mean? That's the only thing I can think of. There's never a requirement from Sony to do a platinum, because there's a million games out there that should have platinums and don't. And developers will come back and say, well, Sony wouldn't let me have one, which is bullcrap, because apparently you can just write back to Sony and say, yeah, we're going to have one, and they do it. And it's the whole platinum trophy thing from Sony is really strange. There's no clear cut answer. And my sources are all the PlayStation podcasts that I have listened to, IGN's Beyond, Colin Moriarty's Sacred Symbols, and prior to that was PS I Love You XOXO. Those are 3 PlayStation podcasts that I listen to, and they all talk about platinum trophies the same way. So that's where I got my information about that from, just to quote inside them. With Mortal Kombat 11, it's I feel like if I didn't spend $10 on this game, if I spent any more money on it, I would have felt like I just got ripped off, because the game's amazing. I talked about it on my favorite things last week, and I love everything about it from when I played it. But the fact that I can get all this stuff done with just an AI it appeals to my trophy hunting like nature, but I feel like it's cheat, like cheating or cheap. And it's just a weird feeling because it's like
not
it's
a platinum
really well
that you're
done,
going to be proud of. You'll be glad to add it to your list, but it's just like you're not going to be like, oh, I worked so hard. You'll be much happier and pleased with your Final Fantasy VII than that.
Well, yeah, that's probably my most favorite one is Final Fantasy VII Remake because it's so hard to get. So anyway, that's what I'm playing. I'm still, I guess I'm loving it. Question mark. It's kind of running in the background all the time whenever I'm at work.
I know you streamed Outer Worlds, but are you actually seriously? Like, are you actually?
I'm never gonna platinum that game.
Well, no, not platinum it, but are you playing it? Like, are you still trying to?
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna finish it. I think. I don't know. I talked about it on the stream when I actually did live stream it, and it's not getting its hooks in me. Like, I'm not excited to go back to it. I don't hate it. I'm not wasting my. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time, and I'm not negatively experiencing anything. But I don't have a positive experience when I'm playing. It's just neutral. I'm like, neutral, I feel like there's something else in my backlog I could jump into that I would be more excited about right now.
Yeah. So we've got to move on to our next segment. Sorry, which is DLC. DLC stands for downloadable content and is a segment of our show where we have just a fun mini sub discussion. It's meant to be a conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games. So to start, this is a 2-part question, but to start with, I need you to answer, what is your favorite fictional language? So this has to be a language that is made up and at least partially learnable, if that makes sense. So has so it could be Klingon, Elvish, Dothraki, any of those fictional languages that authors and creators have taken the time to like flesh out.
Yeah.
So, yes, what's your official language? And then the secondary question that goes with it is, what video game would you play translated into that fictional language? And would you play it with or without subtitles after it's been translated? So, I have my answer already if you need time to think, or if you've got yours, you can go first if you want.
You go ahead. I need to figure out the game I would play that's translated into it. So give me a second to think about that.
Sure. So I know this might sound cliche, but it was the OG fictional language, and I just love Tolkien's Elvish and what he did with it. I mean, I figured you would pick that. The man was a linguist, and many of the other fictional languages are actually based off of Elvish. Like they took the syntax and stuff that he created with Elvish. Like, I'm pretty sure Dothraki, George R. R. Martin's Dothraki, is actually kind of a ripoff of Elvish, with its syntax and stuff. Just change the sounds of the actual words. But Tolkien was a linguist. I absolutely love Elvish and adore it. There's a slew of fantasy games that if I had the option to just turn on voice acting that was all translated into Elvish, that I would totally do it. I would probably still do it with subtitles because I'd like to follow the game, but it would be a blast to just play like The Witcher translated into Elvish or I had other ones. Come on, what's a fantasy game? What's a game that takes place in like Skyrim? Yeah, those kinds of games where it's just like high fantasy setting. If they could just have an Elvish button, I would totally play it in Elvish.
Nice. I'm thinking of Dragon Age as well, but I don't know if you ever played that.
Oh yes, Dragon Age was the exact one that I had in mind. That was the one that was in my head and it was blanking. Yeah, like Dragon Age. Oh, it would be wonderful in Elvish. I haven't played much Dragon Age, but it is a game that if they had an Elvish button, I would like all the characters just being like, Dothra King Lala Pulagadala. I'd be like, yeah, Elvish.
Well, good job speaking Elvish for a second. That was fun.
So it was not. It was like Elvish sounding gibberish is what that was.
Right. Well, duh. That was the joke. You explained the joke.
I got you. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst.
This is quality content right here, folks. There's only one fictional language that matters. I don't understand why you said that like any other. You just listed like 4, and you didn't even talk about it. And that is Hylian. Of course. Like,
is it it's written though? Is it translatable in? Like, is it speakable?
Like I have no idea.
See,
I know it's translatable.
That's the clinch.
And I know it's written. But
I would accept that. Like, if you took, especially one of the Zelda games that did not have voice acting, which is like 90% of them, and just translated all the text into Hylian, I suppose that's acceptable answer.
I don't know if there's actually any. I had to do some research on that to figure out if there's any audible, like spoken Hylian text. I just assumed there was.
But like none of the games have voice acting except for Breath of the Wild, and I don't believe anyone speaks Hylian at any point in that game.
Interesting. But the game that I would like to see translated into it with or without subtitles is Grand Theft Auto 5. I think that'd be hilarious to see like gangsters and drug addicts and like rich, deplorable white dudes all like speaking in highly and at each other. Like,
so you're going for the comedic juxtaposition there. I was going for the thematic, like, oh, this game would be perfect immersed in this, and you're like, juxtaposition. I just want to see these guys. Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, even if you take your Elvish, from Tolkien and throw it into Grand Theft Auto 5, it would be hysterical.
Yes, that would be pretty funny. Yeah,
but it's DLC, right? That's what we do. We juxtapose. That's not a word.
It's not a word, but it's okay. I like made up words. You know that most languages are just made up words, right? At some point they were made up words. And Shakespeare is famous for adding like 35,000 words to the English language that were at the time just completely made up words.
Well, there you go. Somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Juxtapose.
Yeah. What was the one I said yesterday? Fomenti at you?
Yeah.
I was saying
that was made up I had to Google it because I was like, what is that? And then I saw foment. And I was like, oh, okay, you just made it up. All right. You added the extra. I'm feeling fomenty today.
I made it an adjective. I said I'm just feeling a little fomenty right now. Yeah. I was talking about fomenting rebellions. Anyway, so we are well into we are like 35 minutes in now. So
rock on.
That's DLC.
We're having a blast.
Yeah, but I want to talk about localization. So let's talk about...
We have plenty of time to talk about localization.
Let's talk about localization. What the heck is localization?
It's more than just translating.
It is.
Localization is the act of preparing games for their respective releases in different areas of the world. Different areas speak different languages, have different cultures, and have different content and censorship laws. So localization is wrapping all of those things.
Yes, translation is a piece of localization, but localization did get its start as simple translation. But it has evolved over time and over more, as the industry got bigger and more complicated, it had to include like even going down to changing the settings or the content of the game in order to match the region it was trying to sell copies to. So
exactly.
Yeah. So sometimes it gets into some very controversial ground because of, differences in countries, values, and laws. So we'll try to be as neutral as possible, I think, as we talk about it. But there are some controversial things that you might bristle at as we talk about them. So we'll try to just come from a neutral, factual standpoint as opposed to a judgmental standpoint. But we're humans, so some of our biases may leak through. But specifically the process, the part of localization that is specific to like tailoring the content to cultures is called culturalization as well. So there's a couple buzzwords that will be thrown around. But again, localization is the overall umbrella term for that sort of preparation for different markets. So cool.
Yeah. Your next question is, why is localization important?
Yep.
And your question after that is, what are some more famous localization mistakes? And it's almost like those two questions answer each other, because we don't know how important localization is until it's not done well. And then you're like, oh, that's why localization is important. So I have here an article that I will hopefully remember to link off to. You guys can hold me accountable to that. But it was like the 5 most expensive localization mistakes, because there's a couple of different ways to kind of unpack what is important about localization. There is the developer side of like, what do you actually have to do with your hands on the keyboard to help with localization? And then there's the, let's hand off our product to a team and then they localize it or they change things. And you can mess up on all aspects of it. So I'm going to try and touch like across different aspects of this. And so like starting super low level and super like your programming stuff is don't hard code game text, dialogues, choices, and menus, right? You use like resource files that you swap out to other languages or dialects. And this has come out in games where, like it's hard coded in Japanese and you can't do anything about it. Like you can have a ROM go out and dump and fans can translate it, but without actually changing the game code itself, which is sometimes impossible based on compression and compiling. Like you can't undo that. Like it's forever hard coded and it's bad. You should never do that. And then don't rely on like free translation tools to translate your stuff for you.
It's basically like going into Google Translate.
Because that's very short-sighted and it's not 100%. It's very textbooky. It's like, okay, it's a good place to start if you're traveling and you want to order off a menu at a restaurant, but it's not good for translating a piece of content that will be consumed by a culture in a different language. Mm-hmm. Were you going to add anything else to that? Sorry.
What I was going to add is actually probably more relevant to question 4. So It's kind of a mix between question 3 and 4, or not question, sorry, points 3 and 4. Yeah. So go ahead and move on to the next couple, and then we'll talk about it after 4.
So use translators, the people, not tools, but translators, the people that know video games and can work with your game's glossaries, visuals, style guides, plot summaries, trailers, and other translations you have from previous releases if this is like a sequel. Having video game minded people involved in your localization to do all that stuff can look at like a sentence that a character might say and know some context because of like a style guide or a visual like book that shows a bunch of art from this grandeur of a planet. Like you're going to have nuance and you're going to have what's slang in different cultures and stuff, that when a character wants to say something, someone who knows video games specifically knows what to do with all of the game's assets surrounding that character's dialogue and can nail the translation much, much better than just like a canned replacement.
Yeah.
Number 4, don't ignore cultural factors. Localization is more than just raw translation. You also need to be sure your titles are culturally sensitive to each market or risk alienating one of your target audiences. Much of this comes down to the actual content of your game, the story, characters, and events that take place.
Yeah, so what I wanted to add to this is an important fact because this kind of ties into the like origins of localization. And this goes back all the way to Pac-Man, and this is an example that I found where when they went to Pac-Man was a Japanese creation, so they went to translate it to the United States. The original, the actual closest translation of the Japanese word for, I guess I don't know what the actual. I've heard it as like Pakuman or something like that.
I thought it was Paku Paku.
Paku Paku, yeah, that's it. The actual translation would be the closest translation would be Puckman.
Yeah. So
number 1, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the word puck in and of itself, but they wanted to make sure that Americans wouldn't vandalize it.
Yep.
So into a particular obscenity, which you could probably guess. But the other one, the more important one that I think that highlights this point very well is the ghosts, the original ghosts, their names in Japanese would have more closely translated to names such as Ready, Pinky, Bluey, and Slowly. And those names, they realized they were like, those names are kind of clumsy and not easy to say. So they renamed them to Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. And that, again, the addition of Clyde was to sort of maintain that humor of having that sort of odd man out, as opposed to their actual exact meaning. So the change in cultural context between the two countries provoked a change in the game text that was not a precise translation. So instead of, and you can see this, I mean, you can even see this in like anime. If you watch a anime with a American like dub, like US voice dub, English voice dub, but then actual read the English subtitles too, you can actually see that there are subtle differences in the way that they choose, because some things wouldn't sound as good based on like the cultural, what they're going. So it's sort of like the localization. It's not an exact art. It's much more of or exact science, I should say. It's much more of the sort of artistic attempt to try to recreate both the tone and the vibe that I have no other better word than vibe for what the game is trying to convey, so that different audiences from different regions and different cultures will have a similar or the same intended experience that a raw translation could not provide. That's the intention of localization. That's part of the reason why it's important. So I wanted to highlight 4, I think, is probably the best example of that.
Yeah. And then the, much of this stuff comes down to the actual content of your game, and make sure your titles are culturally sensitive to each market. That's kind of where we're at with Hot Water in China and the South Park episode. And, apparently the Avengers movies have been tailored to be not offensive to Chinese. Yep. Yeah, sanitized. And so Americans are offended. Like, oh, this is an American studio in America making movies for America. Like, why would you change your creative direction just to please another audience? And, that you can go down the holes of people are being racist or not. And that's the stuff that we're not a fan of. So, we don't want to exclude folks. I understand there's a lot of hot water around the whole thing. We did that with, we talked about it at length in previous episodes about Blizzard and Hong Kong and Blitzchung firing and all those things. But that is an example of, making sure your content is culturally sensitive. Otherwise, you risk alienating one of your target audiences.
Sure, they do it in
Winnie the Pooh is banned in China.
Yeah, they do. I mean, but it's not just China. Like, again, it's easy right now given other unrelated circumstances to beat up on China. The reality is there's tons of countries that have all kinds of various laws about various things that we as Americans might consider censorship. But it works in the other direction too. There are cultural things in Japan that are more acceptable regarding cartoon, like the modesty of cartoon children that we bristle at in America.
Yeah.
And a lot of localization from Japan to America has sanitized that kind of stuff and has gotten criticism as well. But, you know, or they'll change slight things. Like they'll say this character who is a young looking female wearing a very skimpy outfit. In Japan, the character bio will say she's 15. And in America, the character bio will say she's 19. Just to kind of, you know, give that... and nothing can necessarily change, but sometimes they do change the outfits and stuff like that too. So you also see it in like New Zealand and Australia have very, very strict gore laws, like what is acceptable in regards to what kind of gore can be shown. And many game developers that have, you know, like I think of like Doom, Mortal Kombat, they will just cut out the gore from those games would have in America, they would have like a gore option where you could turn the gore off if you wanted to. In Australia and New Zealand, that gore option is just defaulted to turned on.
Right, and the mistake of not allowing, like, not putting those things into your games is you don't sell to that audience. They'll ban it. And so, like, I've heard games getting banned in Australia. Or, like, you see people on Reddit saying, I can't get this game because it's not allowed in my country. And so that's where you're alienating target audiences and you're actually affecting your bottom line. Wasn't there, like, some hot water about Left 4 Dead? I don't remember the details about the logo with the hand. And it was like the hand gesture was something offensive to a specific country. And so they had to change the artwork of, I mean, this is localization. Like this is the stuff that can happen. I know in Germany, any reference whatsoever to a Nazi flag is completely banned. And so
there was one like swastika that apparently slipped through in, what game was it? There was one swastika that slipped through in a game that was about fighting Nazis. I want to say it was like a Wolfenstein or something. And the game got banned in Germany.
Yep.
Because it's just illegal to show off any.
Yeah,
Nazi
even if it's in a bad light, like it's banned straight up. It doesn't matter.
It was Team Fortress. It wasn't Wolfenstein. It was Team Fortress 2.
Okay.
Was it? Oh no! Well, I'm sorry. It was the 2009 Wolfenstein game. My bad.
Okay.
I saw. Yeah, never mind. Forget the Team Fortress.
Which was the example. Yeah. But yeah, so these are all of the things that happen. It's not just text. You know, it's art, it's assets, it's characters, it's character bios. It's not just dialogue or voice acting.
Yeah. It does bring up, I mean, we are talking about kind of why it's important.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to discuss kind of the, you know, just the headier philosophical aspects of localization. It's very interesting because localization, you know, you can come at it from two angles. And on the one hand, you can say like, you know, the goal of localization is to try to make it so that different people and different cultures can experience the same games and have the same or similar enough experiences to be enjoyable. One of the examples I saw was like, take Fallout 4. Like Fallout 4 is just, or any Fallout game is just like saturated with Americana, you know, references to America, all of the jokes, you know, all the jokes, like quests and stuff like that, and text and all that is meant to be like, oh, Americans will laugh at that.
Right. Take
that game and then try to sell it in, I'll use an example of like Israel. I don't know if Israel has a huge fallout, but like they're not necessarily going to get, you know, we as Americans like to think that everybody's all keyed into our culture and gets all of our jokes, but they don't. So like, how do you translate that game into, is it Hebrew? It's not new. It's not old Hebrew. What do they speak in?
No, I have no idea.
Yeah,
not even going to pretend to know.
Apologies ahead of time for my ignorance to any Israeli listeners out there. I don't know what language you speak, but if they were to translate it into your language, and you know, they might want, you know, again, it's I would argue a good thing to say, hey, we want you to have the same experience. So we're going to tailor some of these references that you might not get. We're going to change some of these idioms into idioms that make more sense with your culture. We're going to, the Americana of the like stuff might still be there, obviously, because it's part of the game assets and whatnot. But like, you know, we'll try to like contextualize it in a way that makes it still enjoyable for you. And it's again way beyond. And then again, if you have any particular laws about not showing particular things, yeah, we'll make that. But that's where you get into the other kind of like double-edged sword, because at what point do you begin to start to breach in that area of censorship? At which point, if you're, you know, when you start making the argument against censorship, then what the argument you're saying is like, no, by censoring this, you are actually taking away from the intended experience of the game. You know, if the game is intended to be gory and visceral to make you kind of feel squeamish, then, or on the flip side, make you feel alive with bloodlust, I guess, that's part of the intended experience. And to sanitize that takes something away from that. Yeah, I don't know. I can see the argument from both ends, but I think at the end of the day, like if there are just straight up laws about it, there's not much you can do if you want it to sell in that region, you know? Right. So it's, I mean,
and then there's decisions developers have to make about the limitations of localization. And I think your Fallout example is exactly that. Like this game and everything about it is set in America. And so there's going to be a lot of historical references, cultural references from Americans that only Americans are going to get. But for the same thing, like if there's a game that's set in Japan, like you're playing Persona and there's things about Japanese culture you're learning, like they didn't cater that to you. And so it goes both ways. When we're playing foreign games, there's only so much you can do. And I think the intent is if you want to make money, because we're a capitalist nation and most companies exist to make money, is you want to sell it in as many places as possible. So you want to reduce offensiveness or offenses. And so the most general like localization things are changing to reduce offenses and help understanding. So it's a bridging a gap of understanding and it's reducing the walls of offense. So all those things are there as well, and it does get complicated. It does get messy, and there's things online about even on Devil May Cry 5 came out of Capcom. There was like on Xbox there was no lens flare over a woman's naked rear end. But on the PlayStation, there was. So there was like this weird Sony censorship that happened that's still in America. Like both games are an American game. Who knows what they were doing with some of the foreign releases, if they were censoring it or not. But the internet went nuts and like everyone was pitchforks and tiki torches and
it's definitely. I mean, again, internet rage aside, I find there are valid arguments on kind of on both sides.
Yeah, me too.
And at the end of the day, there is. It's not so cut and dry, black and white. You know what I mean? Like there are genuine reasons why you may want to, quote, compromise your artistic integrity to slightly make the game more acceptable to a different audience. So, but then again, there are circumstances where it's like, no, you're just trying to make a quick buck, and how moral is that? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What matters is it is a huge part of game development, and it is these are conversations that you have to have an entire team. Most AAA titles will have an entire team, or they'll have a outside third-party contractor come in and help make these decisions for various regions. Because it's a fascinating, again, like kind of like we talked about with game engines last week. It's sort of its own sub industry, and it's sort of this. It is a part of game development that's not often talked about, and a part of game culture, quite frankly, that's not often talked about. But as the world gets smaller, more of these kind of things are easy to compare, over the internet and stuff like that. So.
Yep.
Cool. Well, that moves us to some of the more fun things of what are some of the more famous mistakes or issues of localization from history that we've seen.
Fun. We just talked about how there was like controversy and hatred and censorship, and one of the examples of a mistake.
Well, hold on. Let me. Sorry, I'll say the first one. Yeah, because I just saw your first one. I was like, oh crap. The fun one. Some of the fun ones are more like hilarious translation mistakes, and the kind of poster child for localization, the oft repeated meme / joke that you will hear that is directly related to localization is the quote, "All your base are belong to us."
Yeah,
and it was a poorly translated, like we were talking about earlier. One of the mistakes of early localization efforts was just that kind of raw translation, where people would just run it through free translating software and come up with hilarious results. And I'm blanking on the game right now, but yeah, there was this old game that was a Japanese game that was translated into to an American release, and one of the famous lines, hilarious translations, was "All your base are belong to us." So if you ever hear that, that's a direct.
It's a video game called Zero Wing.
Zero Wing. Okay, yeah. It's just ridiculous, hilarious.
Yeah, and in that same game, there's another one. Somebody set up us the bomb, and I know that one because of Counter-Strike. Back in the day, there was a million times. I think that would come up in chat.
Set up the bomb.
Somebody set up us the bomb. Yeah,
that's funny.
In fact, some servers people have their own like custom Counter-Strike servers. Every time someone planted a bomb, it would say that. So
Nice.
that was well ingrained into my upbringing with gaming.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then there's the Aerith Eris, which was brought into light with the remake of Final Fantasy VII. The original North American release on PlayStation in 97, her name was Eris. And in Japan, it was Aerith. And everyone just picked what they had. And then when the remake came out, they landed on Aerith for all of the English translations and voice acting and text. And it kind of raised a question of like, well, what was her name and why? And it was like, it's actually Aerith. That's really her name. And it was hard for us to even adjust. But that's more of a lighthearted. Yeah. Those are a couple of lighthearted ones.
Yeah.
But then I didn't even know about this. I learned something in some of my research. There were protests in Hong Kong after a firm decided to alter the name of the Pokemon Pikachu. I had no idea that even happened. It sparked centuries-old sentiment of China encroaching on Hong Kong culture, all of which is reignited by the slight change of name to a character.
What was the change?
I don't know. It was like, that was just a sentence I pulled from a different article doing some research about famous localization mistakes. So it does require a little bit more research, but just the name of the Pokemon Pikachu apparently sparked centuries-old sentiment of China encroaching in Hong Kong, which we're still dealing with today.
Yeah.
Actually, there's new news about that today.
Yeah. It's not going to do it.
Crazy. Yeah, we're not. So then there was the big, I remember this. There was a Fire Emblem debacle about Nintendo in the first quarter of 2016. It was embroiled in a localization row that escalated into debates over sexism, homophobia, child pornography, shaming of prostitutes, and hate campaign against one of its most infamous employees. It was very intense.
Was that the Gamergate thing and related to? Hold on, I read about this. The Rapp. What's her name? Allison Rapp.
I don't know. I just remember hearing about this happening. I don't remember the details.
Oh, maybe not. No, it might be a different thing, but it was a Nintendo employee. This is a crazy one. This was all wrapped up in the Gamergate stuff. But there was a Nintendo Treehouse employee. Treehouse is the localization wing of Nintendo.
Yeah.
And so one of their American employees, Allison Rapp, apparently people dug up an old essay that she wrote back in like college, which favored cultural relativism regarding sexualization of minors in Japanese media, which we were talking about earlier. And so the essay argued against the sort of censorship that Treehouse critics decried, and some interpreted the essay as defending the exploitation of children. So like all the Gamergate people like organized a letter writing campaign to have her fired, and she was. But like Nintendo said that she was fired because of having a second job, which is against company policy, and she maintains that she was fired because of the controversial online presence. So it was this crazy thing, like, because there was no actual censorship or localization that happened. They just dug up this like, hey, this person works for you, and she wrote this essay basically defending this. It was weird. It's like, what?
Yep, so, and that's actually exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah,
it is?
It was
okay,
about
I was
Fire
wondering.
Emblem Fates.
Fire Emblem, okay.
Rapp found herself at the center of that furor despite not working on the localization efforts for Fire Emblem Fates. Rapp said it was only the latest of a number of organized campaigns of harassment against her. But yeah, all of that was highlighted in kind of like this game was in the middle of it, and it's all related to localization and how it can go bad.
Changing slight changes to the game in order to make it more palatable for a different audience. Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So when it goes bad, it could potentially go really bad. It could
go really bad. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think if there were any other examples I had, but okay, then I guess that leads us to our last question, which is how has localization changed over the years? Changed and improved over the years, though. So with all these controversies in mind, obviously there have been and still are, quote, missteps to this day because different, cultural contexts change. I know, for example, originally in World of Warcraft, they weren't, apparently this had come out recently. One of the old developers was talking about this and said that they actually originally planned to introduce the pandas for the Alliance in Burning Crusade, and they ran it by China, and China said, no, you can't depict killing pandas, which is like a national pride symbol for our country. So they changed their plans hastily, apparently, to Draenei instead. But then China, apparently years later, China changed their policies, and that's why we have the Mists of Pandaria expansion is entirely because China's like, it's cool, kill as many pandas as you want. And that's why Mists of Pandaria, the expansion, exists, is because the cultural context changed and allowed for choices, whether you consider them good or bad. I don't know how much I can defend a Panda Land expansion, but it was so that entire expansion exists pretty much exclusively because China basically changed their policy. So yeah, cultural contexts are constantly changing and in flux, and some things are hot topic, cultural buttons, and so you might have a group protesting censorship in China, and then a American company localizes something in such a way that is in favor of the censorship that this group is protesting and causes a controversy. And now with the internet, gets viral and goes worldwide and becomes crazy. So, how has it changed over the years, despite the fact that obviously it's still a process and still changing to this day?
The process of localization has become more relevant as society becomes more interconnected and global than we ever have before. And so there's more insight into other cultures than we've ever had. It continues to grow. We continue, like you said, the world is shrinking. And so as that happens, game companies and developers are more aware of the global presence of their stuff in general. I mean, you go back to the Nintendo era and Atari, it was very segmented. There was Japanese developers, there was European developers, there was American developers, and they were all kind of in their own bubbles, except for the global hits that made the news and are the biggest game hits. But apparently the PC early like 70s and early 80s PC gaming in Europe was crazy, like way more than America had ever seen. There was so much going on in Europe, just that. And we had no idea. Like, Americans had no clue. I remember, growing up through the Super Nintendo and N64 era, and I had no idea that the Final Fantasies were numbered differently in North America than they were in Japan. It was completely separate. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until way later, after some magazine publications around Final Fantasy VII, and everyone in North America is like, why is this 7? The last Final Fantasy game we received was 3 on the Super Nintendo. Where did the last 4 Final Fantasies go? Turns out 3 was 6, and 2 was 4, and we never got 3, and it was nuts. And so all that to say is, how has localization changed? Is we're just more connected. We're more aware of each other, and we're more conscientious about selling our stuff everywhere else to make more money. And so it goes hand in hand with the development of society and the internet.
Yeah, I mean, and as we mentioned before, I mean, even just as simple as back in the day, it was one person's responsibility for this game to translate it into English or vice versa. And I mean, now the way it's changed is there are contractors, there's entire businesses that's their entire business model is, hey, we will sell our localization services for your games, and we'll come in and we'll do all that. And there are some bigger development studios that have entire localization wings, like Nintendo. As we mentioned, the Treehouse Nintendo's Treehouse exists, and it is a localization wing of that's meant to bridge the cultures that Nintendo sells well in and sells their games to. So that's all. That's blown up in the last 20 years or so, and that's a huge change from where we were in the 90s, or I mean, I think it was fine in the 90s as well, but still in its infancy compared to where it is now, where it's an entire sub-industry portion of the industry. So cool.
And even in the game development perspective, world, software development technologies are improving. Technologies, support tools, engines, everything is becoming more advanced and easier, more modular, so that you can have the ability to offload all of your text into an entire service instead of a text file that's read in at runtime and compiled on disk. You can just have a whole service of stuff, a whole piece of software that changes the text on the fly. So when you go into the options, you change it from English to Dutch, and everything changes. The voice acting is loaded, the correct assets are loaded. It's all done, and that's only because of the advancements we have in software engineering in general that are across all products, any software that you're using. So that's also advanced way more than it has been ever, and continues to get that way.
All right, cool. Well, I think that wraps up our conversation pretty nicely with a bow.
Yeah.
About localization. So we want to hear your thoughts on localization and whether you think that it is important or whether you don't really care because you don't ever play games in other languages. But we want to hear if you think it's controversial. Do you lean more on the side of, developers having integrity and maintaining that instead of trying to cater to the whims of various cultures? Or do you believe in the sort of open, hey, everybody should be able to experience these games and Therefore, localization is a noble effort. So we want to hear your various and nuanced thoughts on those things. So Termite, where can the good pod smashers of the internet reach out to us if they have thoughts and want to share them?
Please don't forget to ridicule Penguin Man for not knowing the language spoken in Israel. And you can do that at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where there are links to Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We are a weekly podcast that goes live every Monday at midnight with various topics. So please subscribe with whatever app you use. Our RSS feed is also available. You can plug that into any third-party app. We are on social media services around. You can follow us live. You can interact with us on Discord. There's a link on all of the show notes to our Discord server, so you can get in there and chat with us. There are alerts for numerous things in Discord, so that's probably the best way to keep up with us. There is Facebook, there's Instagram, Twitter. We have a subreddit. All of it is 80-bit Podsmash, 80-bit Podsmash. No uppercases or no funny business, no hyphens, just 80-bit Podsmash. And then we have our twitch.tv/80-bit Podsmash. Every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, we are live, and we alternate between Penguin and Termite. Sometimes it's Penguin twice, sometimes it's Termite twice, and we just play whatever we feel like playing. It's kind of a no frills, but we like to talk about the pedigree of the developers that are making the game. We try to educate you guys on what we're doing and like give you guys kind of an inside scoop of an analysis of video games. So we try to do that on our Twitch streams, and you can catch us there, twitch.tv/80-bit Podsmash. You get everything.
I looked it up. I was ignorant, and so I educated myself using the tools in my hand. And it turns out I was right with my first gut response. It is Hebrew. Is the official language. Specifically, it is modern Hebrew, and that was my confusion. As I'm sitting here again, I'm not going to consider myself. I'm an amateur Bible scholar, and therefore I am used to talking about Hebrew in the context of ancient Hebrew. But Hebrew, modern Hebrew, is still a language spoken in the world now, so by Israeli people. So. There you go. I educated myself and hopefully educated some others as a specific outpouring of my own ignorance. So, apologies for any offense. It was not intended. I promise. I'm just dumb. Anyways, so next week, we will not be talking about the Hebrew language. Instead, we will be going through the Wikipedia's conglomerate. That's the reason why we chose it, is it's a general conglomeration of games, a list of games that are considered the best games of all time. So we will be discussing that list and whether or not we believe certain entries should be on it, and we will talk about the ones that we do think should be on it and why they should be on it. So yeah, it's a big list. So that'll pretty much that's what we'll do. That will be our content for the week. And if you have issue with us using Wikipedia, we only chose it because they specifically said these are the games we looked through and parsed through a bunch of other publications to come up with this list. So I think it's a decent one. It's a decent enough one to discuss. So yeah, best games of all time.
It should be fun.
And that will air on June 20. Just June 8th.
Wow,
not 20.
June 8th.
June 8th. So we'll see you then.
See you next week.